So good afternoon and welcome to one and all for this webinar session on impact of COVID-19 on aviation industry. This is part of the Aerospace and Defense Law lecture series, this third in row. So friends, before I introduce the speaker, I just want to say a few words about the university and Center for Aerospace and Defense Laws. Nalsar University started in 1998 with Act 34 with the objectives of producing professionally competent, technically sound, and socially relevant lawyers. Friends, Nalsar is always forefront in research and teaching of contemporary issues. But however, one of the contemporary issue neglected Indian legal realm was air and space law. To fill that gap, we started in 2005 Center for Air and Space Law. We call CASL. Since then, CASL has done a lot of workshops, conducted international conferences, moot courts, promoting and teaching of air and space law. Recent past, actually, last 3 years back, we upgraded CASL, Center for Air and Space Law, to Center for Aerospace and Defense Laws. Part of that last 3-4 years, we are also conducting very many innovative courses, particularly airspace and defense laws. To say few, particularly today is more relevant because we have a master's and PG diploma courses in aviation law and air transport management. This is a very unique combination. Most of the students or participants joining in Nalsar are coming with a technical background. So we thought, why not we give some education on the management side and also legal side. So if people are technical, managerial, and legally sound, then they can do better job. Keeping that in view, we started innovative courses, masters and PG diploma. Again, law and management. We begin with introduction to international air law, domestic air law, liability law, like that. Begin and then super specialty. Similarly, we also did in management. Part of that, introducing the introduction to management, and then airport management, airline management, airspace management, air traffic management. All these are our courses, particularly those who are interested, because this is the time, because we are all in COVID pandemic situation. Particularly aviation industry is the major sufferer in this scenario. That is what we are going to discuss today. But I think this is the right time to invest in education, invest in research. So I appeal all the participants that you can give a thought about improving your education, your research skill in the air and aerospace law, particularly aviation law. So with this, of course, I just want to introduce Mr. Sagar Sangamsetti to as moderator of this today's session. Sagar was my student, of course, he still is my student. Sagar was first batch student of Nalsar. He passed out in 2003. Sagar worked in last 14 years, many multinational companies. He was like transactional lawyer, then policy advisor, regulatory aspect. He dealt many issues, including AirCap, FedEx, then Amazon, to name a few. So Sagar worked in all these areas, particularly focusing on the aviation side, air transport policy and regulatory aspects. Sagar also currently actually is again adjunct faculty, Center for Aerospace and Defense Laws. Friends, to say, actually, I don't want to say too much because he's my student, but one word I want to say about Sagar is, we in Telugu, there is a saying that's called Guruvunu Minchina Shishudu, teacher. So Sagar is like that. He's today is one of the proud product of Nalsar. I am very happy to introduce again my student. So I should not talk more about younger and particularly my student. Sagar, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third webinar in Aerospace and Defense Law lecture series. The theme of today's discussion is going to be the impact of COVID-19 on the Indian aviation industry. I once again welcome all the listeners and the panelists for being part of this session, which is dedicated to commercial aviation sector. At the outset, let me once again, thank Professor Reddy and the Center for Aerospace and Defense Laws at Nalsar for providing this opportunity for us to have a discussion. I know that we have probably come across a number of these kind of webinars because that's the new norm or the new fashion, let's say. But I don't think there have been many webinars that went out from a law school, or there probably are one or very few, actually, to tell you, that a law school has organized specifically on this subject. So before we begin, some very quick house rules. So probably you all guessed it already. So you're all the listeners are muted. It's only the speakers and the organizing staff who are able to speak, and you're able to hopefully see us as well. The webinar session itself is recorded, and a link will be shared in the next days if you're interested further to listen to it once again. And for students who are attending this webinar, I understand that there would be an attendance sheet that will be provided. But lucky you will only get it at the end of the webinar. You're still at school, looks like that. And teachers being teachers, we will only give you the attendance sheet at the end. You can't run away now. You can sleep though in the meantime, but wake up when the attendance sheet is there. One request to all the listeners, please send in your questions only in the Q&A box because probably I will not be able to pick up all the questions if you're sending them in the chat box. One final thing is, as part of this webinar, we will also put out a poll. So you will see 4 questions. So it's also to improve some engagement from your end, or at least to keep it interactive. So we're going to put out a question to you, and you have to basically put in your options, and then we will see what the responses are, and basically we will then discuss based on your responses. Okay, having said that, let me very quickly introduce you to our panelists, which is very important given that it's a Sunday and you all have taken time to hear from our experts or panelists. So let me first start with Mr. Gurmukh Singh Bawa. So Mr. Bawa is an economist and statistician by profession, and he worked in the corporate planning department for the Airport Authority of India, and he headed the public relations department. Mr. Bawa has over 30 years of experience in general and civil aviation industry. He is the youngest among the panel. I was telling him the other day. So, you know, well, young at heart.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then we have another expert coming onto our panel, is Mr. Shashank Jain. Shashank is General Counsel for Air Vistara, and he's been in the sector or in the industry for the last 12 years, and he's responsible at Vistara for the purchase and leasing of aircraft engines, biofurnished equipment. He's also involved in strategic decisions such as in airline partnerships. And formerly, he was an AZB and he worked at AZB and Trilegal, one of the premier law firms in the country. The third person on the panel is Mr. Nitin Sarin, who is a managing partner at Sarin & Co. Nitin specializes in financing, leasing, and repossessing of aircraft. In 2018, he had the privilege to advise an aircraft manufacturer for a massive order of 75 Boeing 737-8 MAX aircraft. That's worth around $8 billion. So quite a big transaction that he has done. And more important, or equally important, is he is an aviation photographer. So check his photos, you will be quite impressed. I'm always impressed. And there's a connection with Nitin in the sense like we studied at Leiden Law School in the Netherlands. Though light years apart, he's a lot more younger and more energetic than me, but yes, I mean, that's also the Leiden flag that we keep hoisting high enough wherever we go. And last but not least, we have another youngster, Ujjwal Bakshi. Ujjwal is the Industry Relations Manager at IATA, the International Air Transport Association, the voice of airlines, as they call themselves. Ujjwal works on policy and advocacy and regulatory matters in India, Nepal, and Bhutan. He engages with government and industry stakeholders to channelize the associations, of course, the policies that they have for the airline industry, or the interests that they have to cover for the airline industry. And his other interests are, apart from aviation, is information technology and also mobility sectors. Mobility is a very broad topic. Aviation is one segment in the transportation sector. So never forget that each and every segment of transportation is very important. It's just a tip for people who are attending this webinar. So having these youngsters, among us, I'm privileged to also moderate the session. So this session is going to take approximately around 1 hour, 15 minutes in terms of our discussions. So before I hand it over to the panelists, I'll just very quickly paint a picture of what the industry currently is going through. So let me see if I can share this content on the presentation as a presentation. Tariq, maybe you can help me there if I'm not able to do that.
Yes, I'm here, sir.
But I cannot share the content.
You will be able to do now.
Yeah, thank you. So let me very quickly paint a picture of what, let me just put these things down. Yeah, so the theme, as I said earlier, as all know as well, it's about the impact of COVID-19 on the Indian aviation industry. So let me very quickly run through what the global picture is for the sector. So COVID has had a global impact on not just the aviation, but more broadly across all the sectors in the economy. And aviation continues to play a key role to connect the world, whether it's people or goods. It's one of the primary things that aviation sector is doing and supposed to do. And as you know, during COVID-19, a number of them in the sector have worked tirelessly to bring in the medical equipment and other vital goods, and also their efforts on repatriation is commendable. I always say that transport and logistics in general is taken for granted. Nobody understands probably or the value that this sector is bringing. And it's one of the things that I've seen in the last 15 years is, of course, when we talk about finance sector or pharma sector, everyone gets their credit except for the transport sector. So let's take a second just to, appreciate or, congratulate some of the heroes that have worked in the sector over the years, but more specifically during the COVID time. So it's just to salute to them. Okay. Having said that, again, the air cargo, despite the fact that the COVID has a huge impact on the passenger transport, the positive aspect or the positive side of what we have seen in the last couple of months is that air cargo has proven once again that it's very essential, and especially during crisis time. It's because the medicines that are in the pharmacies or in the hospitals, or the fact that you have food on the shelves of the supermarket, it's not just flying from somewhere, or these things are not coming out of the blue. It is provided by the transportation sector, and more specifically about the aviation sector. So having said that, again, the difficulty I have, or that I've come across in the last couple of months, is everyone says that, oh, aviation has done great, or transportation sector has been recognized as an essential sector. But in terms of the financial support received by the sector, I have to say it's very, very, very limited. Or you could also go to the extent of saying that there was no financial support given by the governments to the sector. And at the same time, if financial aspect is one thing, but you could also see that the legal, regulatory, and policy hurdles still remain the same. There is no flexibility given by the governments to basically, give operators the possibility to operate. Okay, so the hurdles still remain the same. If I have to go to the slide, I cannot. Oh yeah, this is too much of content, but I just wanted to. You don't have to read line by line. But the idea is to share with you what has been the global impact of COVID on aviation, tourism, trade, and economy in general. If you look at the air passenger traffic itself, 48% to 61% in 2020. It's not normal, and it's totally unheard of. Even during the recession in 2008, we haven't seen such a drop. Airports have an estimated loss of 50% of passenger traffic, and you'll see the related revenues there. The same for airlines, it's above 50%. Tourism, one of the sectors that tend to support travel, or the other way around, that transport supports tourism sector, it's totally down, which for all good reasons. Of course, health is the priority, and health and safety will continue to be the top priority for the travel sector and should remain a top priority for the sector as well. But the impact on tourism is just awful, and I'm not sure how long it's going to take to reinstill that confidence among the people to actually come back or start traveling and visiting places. What it means is the trade overall also has an impact, of course, with job losses and the contraction in the overall economies individually. We will see that the buying capacity is going to reduce, so therefore we will see a contraction in overall trade as well. And last but not least, we have seen some signs of recession already in 2019, but then the COVID came in, and you'll see that it's already projected around 5% in the world GDP in 2020. It's going to get impacted. It's just to paint a picture, and then my last slide here tries to show you a quick example. I've taken some examples from Europe because I'm based here. It just goes to say, specifically on the aviation industry and for the airline sector, I've just listed out few airlines. The financial situation of these airlines, so most of them will last probably on an average, I would say another 6 months. And despite the best efforts from the government, where there has been some funding given by various governments across the world, but it seems that the airlines will not sustain. So we will see a lot of reduction in the fleets. So a number of aircraft are already grounded and will continue to remain grounded because people are not traveling, and also because of the capacity restrictions that countries have imposed. And what it also means is you also already hear, like British Airways going to cut down around 9,000 jobs. You heard of Emirates doing the same thing. I'm sure the other airlines across the world are going to reduce their employee headcount. The fixed costs will remain because we are physically intensive in the sense that we have infrastructure in place. We need terminals, we need aircraft. These are all physical assets, and assets come with fixed costs. You have to pay your lease rentals, and on top of that, any other kind of mortgages you have, you should continue to pay them. So the costs are not going anywhere. So it's just to tell you, like, these costs are there, and then the security measures are going to go up, which means that the costs for airlines and the airports, and of course for the customers, they will see it in their own ticket prices, I suppose, that the costs are going to go up. And all this is happening with a very low demand for travel. So which means that either it's zero revenue or very less revenue, which relates to not a very profitable business for the airline sector. So this is what the airline and the general aviation sector is facing. I believe this is going to remain for a few years, at least in Europe or across the world. They expect at least 2 to 3 years for the airline industry to recover, or even more. So I'm not trying to be very pessimistic or anything. I'm not a pessimistic person myself, but it seems to be the case that the impact is such that that looks like it's going to take a while before we could recover. So before I hand it over to the panelists, let me say that The road to recovery is long, bumpy, and very turbulent for the sector. And with no real support coming from the government, we need to see what the future of the aviation, especially in India, is going to look like. And as part of our panel here, we have lawyers and policy experts. So we have to hear from them how we can support our businesses in terms of, what flexibility are we seeking in the interpretation and the application of legal and policy rules currently in place. I think to that extent, at least we should be able to propose to the business, or that's how you create value as lawyers or as policy experts. So let's see what our panelists have to share with us. But before doing that, or before I turn to Ujjwal, who is going to be the first speaker on the panel, let me ask Tariq to please, if you don't mind, to put out a dummy poll for the audience so that they can see what or how this poll would look like or what they're supposed to do.
Sure.
You're still there, Tariq? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm adding the poll.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so this is to the audience. It's just a dummy or a test poll. So if you don't mind, please, can you? The idea is, you just put your cursor on one of the options. Like whichever it is, A, B, C, D. You have 4 options, and then you submit it. So no rocket science there. You're not building an aircraft here or assembling an aircraft. It's pretty straightforward. So let's see how many of you are able to do that, and then we will post a real question. And I request each of you to please take the poll because that's the only way to keep this interactive, and also we will also get some hopefully clear and lucid answers from the panelists as well. And probably some of your questions are already addressed through these poll questions that we are raising. So normally you have 1 minute, 45 seconds to a minute to answer the question, and then once the poll ends, you will, on the right side of the screen, you will see the results. Tariq, you still there?
I'm with you.
Yeah. Can you show the results, or is that now that it's ended, the poll? So okay, this is how you will see it. So a number of them opted for or a lot of them actually did not answer. So that's also a good sign, which means that you are either not active, sleeping, so wake up, or you put in your option and then go back to sleep. Okay, so good. Let's go for the first poll and first question on the poll, and then let's see what our audience have to say. Okay, and here we start with the discussion, with the real discussion from the panelists. So Tariq, on to you for placing the first question.
Sure. The first question is live. You can give the answer.
Yes. Thank you. So the first question on the screen that you see is, do you feel safe to travel by air in 2020 based on the health measures taken by the operators and with total respect to social distancing rules? No pressure.
The poll will end in 100 seconds.
we just decided to give enough time, not because of people reading slow, but also because we have 500 or just above 500 listeners on the webinar. So it takes a while for us as well to it takes us a while to also gather that feedback. So that's the reason why we have given ourselves a minute. Okay. Okay, I think Tariq, you can close the poll now.
Yes, I'm closing the poll. I'm saying your responses. So another 10 seconds, I'll close.
I think that's good enough time, Tariq. Close the poll.
Yeah, I have closed it and the results are also out.
Okay, so as you will see that we have around 25 to 50% of them who feel confident that they are willing to take an aircraft. So I would say that let's see what the panelists have to say. Ujjwal, would you start, or given that you probably have seen in many of the IATA studies, what do you think about this? And how would you react to this?
Yeah, that's quite a mixed bag. May I request Tariq to please give me the presenter right so that I can just pull on a few slides?
Sure.
But maybe I first, maybe it's good to respond to this query, like how you feel or what you think, or Shashank, you could also pitch in.
Yeah. No. So my response or my personal response to this query would be slightly different from others. Is probably because I work for IATA and I'm probably a little more informed than the average citizen on what are the measures that each of the airports and airlines are now taking to COVID, and how how there is minimal risk of transmission on board because of the technology and measures.
Sorry, Ujjwal, your voice is breaking. We cannot hear you properly. Can you get closer to the mic?
Was it muffled? Was it muffled all along, or would you like?
Yes, it was muffled all along.
Okay. Is it better now? Are you able to hear me clearly?
It's slightly better.
Okay. Hold on. Does it work better now?
This is better. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. So I was just saying that my personal response may be slightly different than what an average citizen would respond, because we being from the aviation industry, I'm working for IATA, I'm probably slightly more informed on what are the measures or what is the technology involved and the minimal risk of transmission on board or the efforts that airports and airlines are taking to avoid any sort of transmission, while a person travels. Having said that, I do feel that generally the sense there is anxiety amongst travelers. I will anyways take you through some of the revelations of the surveys that we've done both in April and in June across 11 countries. So yes, I would like to leave it there.
Yeah. Okay. Shashank, do you think this is a positive sign for the airline sector, with most of them willing to travel, around 25-50%, or even a good number of them saying around 50, even 75 to 100 of them, 100% willing to travel if and when there's a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a positive trend, and in fact, we had done a poll of our own for our Club Vistara members, and the results that we had over there were very similar to what's reflecting here on the poll. So it's it's heartening. But I think the main reason for anxiety that people have is not necessarily emanating from what the airlines are doing or they are not doing, because frankly, and as Ujjwal mentioned, airlines are definitely super safe, and there's a lot that is being done by the airlines and by the airport operators and everyone in the sector to ensure that traveling is safe. The main reason for anxiety, because we had a more nuanced sort of survey, the main reason for anxiety over there was that the rules of the state governments are sort of changing, and people are like that we might be safe at the airport, but or inside the aircraft, but we could be at risk of transmission if we go to another destination, because there cannot be a more controlled environment than an airport and an aircraft possibly. So probably that came out as the anxiety reason for us in our polls. I'm just trying to add layers to the poll that we have here.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Baba, do you have anything to share, or
Yes, I was thinking that I should share my thought on this. First of all, whenever you check the BP of any patient, you want him to be at rest. If he is coming to stay, you don't test his BP, and if you test, it is not the correct. So first of all, this is not the right time to take such a poll, because everybody is in stress and the dilemma of COVID, no COVID, what will happen. So that's why they get influenced by the fear of the disease, fear of the pandemic. And also we know that even the government has drawn its plan based upon this consensus in mind, and that's why government has staggered the first they will revive 20 to 30%, then they will revive 50 to 60%, then gradually they will come full-fledged, and it will take time. So that this pool result is well in place. That's what my mind on this.
Okay, Mr. Baba, thank you for that. I think the difficulty, you're right, that probably it's not the time to take a poll, but my only response there is the airlines are bleeding, or the aviation sector is bleeding, and to that, of course, we need to show some kind of flexibility for the operators to operate, and this is the flexibility that we are seeking, or how do we get there is the question. But again, let's see what.
I don't say that you should not take such a poll. We should take a poll, but we should assign some weight to correct its results. That's what my point.
Okay, sir. Okay.
I think, Sagar, if I may just add one more, slightly different angle. Apart from the health and safety aspect, our Indian flying society is extremely price sensitive. So this whole issue, even which I'm going to be addressing later in my short presentation, is really in respect of this whole credit shell issue. So as much as health and safety is on one side, our Indian traveling public is very scared of putting their money into a pot which they may not be able to get back in the near future. So slightly different angle to that, but just wanted to add it there that that's also causing anxiety, which ultimately is unhealthy.
Good point. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Ujjwal, off to you then, and let's kickstart with your presentation. And Ujjwal is going to again, he's from IATA, and he's going to tell what the airline industry is going through, more with specific focus on India. Thank you.
Sure. I'm just standing by for Tariq to give me the rights and put on the presentation. Okay.
You can start, Mr. Ujjwal. You are the presenter.
Just a quick point. So people who are not presenting, or who are not talking now, please put yourself on mute so that we don't have an echo.
Ujjwal, you can share your content now.
Yep, it is loading.
Sure.
Thank you. Just to confirm, can you see the first page of the presentation?
Yes, we are able to see. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so Thank you, Sagar. Thank you for setting the context. I'd like to begin by thanking the CADL, Nalsar, Professor Reddy, you, for giving IATA an opportunity to speak here. I would also like to thank the co-panelists and about 550 odd participants who spared some time on a Sunday afternoon to be present here. Thank you all. I have about 7 or 8 slides to present, which should take me about 8 or 10 minutes. It's a broad overview of what IATA's view is in general and what it thinks about the industry restart and what are the key points that I'd like to make. So to begin with, I realize that there are a lot of youngsters, students who are part of this audience, and in case some of them may not be entirely aware of what IATA does, we are the global trade association for all the world's airlines. We were founded in the year 1945 in Havana, right after the Second World War, when the Chicago Convention came into place. And our job is really to support aviation in anything and everything through global standards, through advocacy, which is overarching aspects related to safety, security, efficiency, sustainability. So that's what we really stand for. We at the moment have close to about 290 airline members, which encapsulate about 82% of world's traffic. And we are headquartered in both Geneva and Montreal. Montreal because it's also the seat for ICAO. And in India, we are based out of Gurgaon, and that's where I work out of. So that's a quick one on where IATA is. So yes, to begin with, this is a snapshot of what the global impact has been. These are the latest numbers, something that Sagar also touched upon, but some of the latest findings. Unfortunately, 2020 has been the worst year in aviation history. I'm sure it is also the case in many other sectors, but I think aviation is hit more than many. And airlines across the world are expected to lose about $84.3 billion this year. In fact, several airlines have already filed for bankruptcy protection in Europe and other parts of the world. Airline revenues will fall by about 50%. In a total of what was seen in 2019, that was $838 billion, a total year-on-year revenue. I think 2020 will clock about $419 billion, which is exactly half, almost half of. So you can see the industry is decimated by half, and it will, obviously impact the sheer scale, the scope, the reach, the connectivity that is provided by it across the world. So yes, things don't look very good at the moment, but we should have enough reasons to stay optimistic. So moving on to India, what we see, these are the figures which have been collated just on Friday, some revised figures. And we see a passenger revenue fall of about 11 billion in the year 2020, just for India. The demand decline is about 49%, which is exactly in line with the world projections. And this will actually lead to a passenger loss of about 93 million. 93 million less passengers will travel because of the COVID that has happened. COVID has risked about 3 million jobs in India, just in India. This includes airlines, airports, and all the related service providers, the agents, the allied service providers, ancillaries, everyone. So those are the numbers, those are staggering numbers of jobs that are at risk. And so as we can see, this pandemic has not only strained the public health system, but it has also really caused an unprecedented erosion to the economy and the livelihoods. And the sooner that we are able to open up borders or normalize operations, the better it will be, at least on the economy and the livelihood front. So that's where I like to leave the India picture. Now moving on, so obviously Sagar also touched upon it. Relief measures are more important than ever, and one has to realize that that providing support to airlines has broader economic implications. As there's an IQ multiplier, that one job in aviation results to 6 jobs. There's a multiplier. So it enables connectivity. It does so much more than what we just see. So ITA is therefore calling for a combination of direct financial support, loans, guarantees, tax relief to basically contain the situation for the moment. And in fact, many governments have provided these economic reliefs to the sector, especially those governments who see aviation as a strategic driver for national economies. And these have also been the governments who understand the need of having a robust or a aviation sector in the right shape whenever they begin the recovery journey, because it's very important to have aviation up and running so that they can actually recover through the post-COVID scenario. USA, Singapore, Australia have, I think, clocked a number of about $123 billion in cash aid, loans, and wage subsidies to the industry. In India, although we are yet to see any direct financial benefits, although we've seen some indirect benefits being offered to the industry, but obviously we would need more. And this is actually a very, very opportune time to address some of these long pending issues, like bringing ATF under GST, so many things. I mean, I can go on. There's a whole laundry list, but I'll probably not take that much time today. Moving on. So yes, thanks Sagar for doing a mini poll, and I'm looking forward to the other questions and the response to it. But yes, here too, I mean, ITA did a poll. ITA commissioned surveys across 11 countries. There were about 5,000 odd respondents, including the ones in India. And this was done both in April and then in June. First at the start of April and then in the mid of June. And the latest survey, interestingly shows that people are more cautious now than they were earlier, even in April when the whole outbreak happened and people didn't know what to do. So they have, as gradually things have turned up, people have become more cautious and more anxious about things. So if you see in these this graph, only 47%, will fly within 1 to 2 months. Previously, this number was 60%. So almost 20% dip in, 20 or 25% dip in the number of people who would want to travel in the immediate future. And also, if you see, I'm talking about the last 3 graphs here, last 3 bars here. More than 50% of the respondents say that they will not be comfortable traveling in the next 6 months or more, which is a very, very, concerning number, which is a very, very concerning stat. And naturally, the impact in terms of demand will be dramatic going forward, which will in fact affect the whole recovery process as we try and move and shake ourselves back to normal. And the only way I see this, being addressed is by inspiring confidence within passengers. And as industry stakeholders, for us, it is very important, I think, more than ever, again, as I say, to work together collectively to address this issue and address and inspire some confidence within the passenger community. This is another graph which resonates with what Shashank was saying. So clearly, quarantine has been equally strong factor of anxiousness or anxiety amongst passengers. A lot of people, in fact, if you see in this graph, most of the people are worried about the 14-day quarantine being imposed on them. 83% of people or the respondents, expressed hesitation in traveling because it entails quarantine. And in fact, if you match up both the numbers, the ones who are anxious because of quarantine or the ones who are anxious because of transmission of COVID while they travel, it is almost equal. So both the factors of anxiety have sort of played up equally. So that's what I wanted to sort of reflect back upon Shashank, as he rightly brought it out then. So now, as we see the situation, obviously there's a lot that needs to be done, and ITA, among all the other things that it's been doing, I think is over the last few months worked very closely with the International Civil Aviation Organizations, Aviation Recovery Task Force, and we put together a practical guidance for restart and recovery for basically everybody across the globe, all the airlines, governments, and aviation stakeholders. And this is actually also in sync with a multi-layered approach, towards biosafety that ITA has, been advocating for. So, it cannot be just one measure here or there. It has to be a convergence of many measures taken at various levels at the end of various stakeholders who should be accountable for it. So, it includes automated or contactless passenger facilitation, health declaration, social distancing, and wearing masks wherever it is possible, and more frequent sanitization. So many. I mean, I can read it on the screen. So, what happens is that this layered approach not only addresses the risk of transmission during travel, but it also complements the conventional aviation philosophy for risk mitigation, which has been effectively used to mitigate issues related to safety, security over the years, over the decades. So it is actually in line to all of that. And therefore, we as IATA feel that this multi-layered approach will play the most important role in restoring the passenger confidence and for the industry to take off again. With this, I would like to conclude this part of the presentation, but I look forward to sharing some more views as more of your questions are posed to us. Thank you. Over to you, Sagar.
Thank you, Ujjwal. Thanks a lot. I think the negative or the side effects of COVID are clearly seen, that the demand not picking up. But at the same time, I'm also equally glad that there are these measures that are being put in place by the industry, and a lot of efforts are going through by the operators to bring back that confidence among the passengers. So at least there is some positive element, or at least there's something to look forward in the next months, where probably we'll see more numbers going up as well. So we will move to the next panelist. It's going to be Shashank, who's going to speak, who is part of an airline. So probably he'll sink in with a number of things that Ujjwal has shared with us. But before going to Shashank, let us also do another poll. So Tariq, if you can go to the next poll, please, poll question.
Sure, sir, I'm on it.
One of the key things that I continue to see is that this common theme that is going through, it's called survival and continuity. I think we need to make sure that all these operators survive this this pandemic, and they should be in a position to continue to operate, because at the end of the day, if none of these operators survive this pandemic, probably we have a bigger issue to face when the economy revives. I think that's what we need to keep in mind when we're talking about, okay, there's a lot of pessimism, there's a lot of negative side of things, but what is the future? I think the future is, at some point, economy will revive, and we need the players to be in the market, because at the end of the day, all this is being done is for the consumers, and customers also, of course, have to feel that comfort and that convenience should be there in place. Okay, so I'm just trying to fill in a gap with a message. But here is the second question for the poll. So audience, wake up. So we have the second question. You'll see. This is more relating to the financial support that the aviation sector requires. So the question is, do you see the need for more financial support extended to the companies in the aviation sector by the government, whether it's through bailouts or tax exemptions, what Ujjwal has laid out earlier? Having said that, it's important also to note in your response, because we know that some of the companies were not in a good financial health even before COVID. Correct. You don't have to wait for the whole minute. If you think you don't see any responses, then you can.
We have given 2 minutes, so it will end in another 20 seconds.
2 minutes? No.
We have 500 plus participants. The system needs to.
Okay. Mr. Bawa, maybe you can already reflect on this, if that's okay, in terms of, what do you think over the years you've been associated with the sector, and also you have seen a couple of recessions already that the sector has gone through, or at least that every 10 years or every cycle, there's always a cycle for that aviation has been going through the downside. Is this any different to those kind of recessions that the airline sector has gone through, or is there a special need or necessity why airline sector today should be supported more than the earlier times? Or Shashank, you can also jump in. If I think Mr. Bawa, you need to unmute yourself.
Yes, I think these are just
okay.
Absolutely.
We have
right. Am I audible?
We have 4 brothers.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Bawa, carry on. Sorry,
okay.
Shashank.
Having seen the results, I was aware the result part of it. Financial support measures from the government, everybody looks whenever there is a pandemic or whenever there is a recession, and aviation is not immune to such situations, such circumstances. And particularly India, that one bad crop, farmers start demanding compensation for their crops. And one hailstorm, farmers start asking for compensation. So why not airlines, right? And we always cater for that also. But naturally, the economic on airlines has been very, very immense in this present pandemic. And it has a domino effect further on this. So to reduce this burden, it is a duty of the government, or it is duty of the big brother to support the partners of the industry. You see, all airlines are not same. They are very big airlines who can support 2 or 3 smaller airlines. And if they, as you rightly said, if we do not survive, no one will survive. So if we want smaller airlines to survive and they will become giant, so we can see consolidation of airlines, we can say consolidation of airport operators, new models need to be developed, but financial support is essential. And as regards the volume of financial support people have been demanding, I was looking one statistic in USA, they were asking $600 billion US as a compensation. In India also there is a wire was being raised by 25,000 crores to 30,000 or 50,000 crores. So there are enough numbers, but government support could be seen also in indirect way. Also, the government, even if it is not giving you the financial support, government is giving you a lot of support in indirect manner. For example, government is mobilizing essential cargo maybe it's medicine and cargo, they have ensured so that the wheel of aviation doesn't stop. So that is a big support from the government. And then government has established a bridge between the airlines and the airports between the two countries. So that is also a very good motivator. Government has undertaken the evacuation of citizen or repatriation of the citizen, which is also a big help. And from 7th May, the government officially announced a full-fledged Vande Mataram plan. So all these things should be taken in the view. The government is looking at the rehabilitation of the airlines. Their demand is not falling on deaf ears. So that is my take on that.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you. Shashank, would you hear?
Absolutely, I agree with the parts of what Mr. Baba has said, but I'd like to clarify and bring it. Maybe people don't know that airlines have actually carried most of the cargo for the government for free. So the government has not provided any support in terms of cargo, or we have carried doctors and other essential commodities for the government for free. It's not any form of support that the government has been providing on that. Also, on the Vande Bharat flights and all of that, the priority has been given to the national carrier and not to the private carriers. So that's again sort of a point which I would like to bring. We have definitely done Vande Bharat flights for sure, but not in the numbers what we would have liked and what we had hoped for, and we had requested the government. So that's definitely there. Other than that, I don't think there's any real financial support which the government has been providing. For an airline like ours, the support that we were hoping for and we've been requesting the government for is probably more on the policy and on the legal side of things than direct equity or any kind of loan. Though there have been airlines who have been requesting for that, but we did not make that request to the government along with some certain other airlines, because we are very well aware that the government itself does not have money to put into airlines, and it's simply not there. So you're hoping for something which is not possible. So what we were hoping for is bringing policy and legal reform. And the unfortunate reality remains that when I started working in aviation sector, the issues were these very issues which continue till today. And we were hoping that, because of this corona situation, the government would sort of bring certain reforms, but that's not been there. The government did start with a consultation process where the industry submitted the exact same old list of issues to the government, but nothing has really been done, except you must have read in the newspaper about airlines being provided additional air corridor and air corridor being freed up for civil aviation. But in times where there is simply no load or there's no traffic, it doesn't really translate to anything or anything much, because the existing corridors are sufficient for airlines to operate. So that's not like an immediate relief, but yes, in a long term, it will amount to some kind of relief. The other kind of issues that the airlines have on the legal side is, as Ujjwal had mentioned, is bringing ATF under GST. That's been like a really, really long-standing, and that would have really helped. What the government did on the ATF and on the on things to just make things slightly more worse for the airlines is they capped the fares, and at the same time they jacked up the price of the ATF by putting additional levies and all of that. The fuel is globally at like all-time low, but those benefits are not being passed on to the airline. The taxes are being increased, and it's just becoming, it's being made more expensive for the airline. So GST has definitely been a long-standing demand of the industry generally, that bring ATF under GST, but that's not happened. Another sort of issue which was not an issue earlier is on customs duty. So basically, airlines have to send parts and things abroad, like an engine or anything. For most of the things, you have to send those abroad to the maintenance and repair overhaul organizations abroad. When you take those products out, then again, you have to pay customs duty on things, just to keep things running, which was not the case earlier. That's an issue. The other sort of issues are relating to GAR and all of that. The government has gotten increasingly aggressive into investigation on leasing structures. So for those who don't know, aircraft leases into India happen through Irish leasing structure. There are entities incorporated in Ireland, and then they lease the aircraft. That's obviously done for, other than Ireland aviation excellence, a good chunk of that reason is to do with taxation. Now the government is getting very aggressive on that as well, and is questioning that structure itself. So if that structure sort of collapses, then you can probably consider it to be like a doom for aviation, in India generally, because it will simply not be economical for airlines to have any kind of operation. The revenue per kilometer seat in India are possibly, which is known as RASK in airline aviation terms, is one of the lowest in the world, and it's maybe the cheapest to fly in India. But the costs just keep on increasing and keep on adding up. So the margins of the airlines, which are already percent, come under further pressure. The other sort of issues that Indian Airlines face is are relating to lack of a developed bond market and availability of cheap finance through capital markets, and those kind of products are not available because we don't have that kind of a matured market. So if I were to put things into perspective, so far the Chinese airlines, they have sort of been more resilient to Corona and its impact because they have been able to raise very cheap finance in renminbi in China to sort of support themselves. And for the Chinese airlines, the advantage is that they have a huge, most of their outflows and money that they need to pay are denominated in renminbi. So they are able to raise finance in that currency and make the payment in that. And the bond market is pretty robust there. So, and the government is providing support to airlines over there in terms of relaxation, compliance with rules and all of that type of stuff. Unfortunately for Indian Airlines, all of our debt and most of our costs are denominated in the US dollar. And as we know, the rupee is continuously depreciating. So Corona has one impact, but a huge impact that airlines have had is because of the foreign exchange depreciation. In the last couple of months, the rupee has depreciated by 10 rupees approximately. So you can imagine what a huge dent it has had on the balance sheet of the airlines and the costs of the airlines. Coupled with this, there are other restrictions that we face in terms of our foreign exchange regulations. For example, if an airline has to give a SDLC, a letter of credit, to a foreign lessor or to an entity for an import or, as security, it has to be provided by an Indian bank. And then it has to be reconfirmed by a foreign bank because that's what our foreign exchange law requires. We can't obtain it directly. So that creates a lot of problems for Indian companies because it leads to Indian companies tripping on exposure norms, the banks, and also it's higher costs because you end up paying the confirmation and the LC at two levels. So those are the kind of things that's going on, and the government could have done things about it. The other sort of aspects are in relation to costs. One of them being the cost for airports and the parking fees. So as you know, the aircraft are now parked at different airports, so there's really no relief from the government on that fees. We're not saying that we should be given a complete waiver, but providing some kind of additional credit period is from making those payments would have really helped and gone a long way for the airline. But that's not sort of been provided. So that would have been helpful. And there was a pointer about this in Ujjwal's presentation as well about airports and airport parking fees. The other sort of demand that the airlines have had is in relation to credit shells, and I think Nitin will talk about it because he mentioned something around that. So the airlines have been requesting that they should be permitted to have these credit shells. And obviously, Nitin, what you're saying about customers being anxious, if I were in customers' people would be anxious about it. But I think there are ways to secure interest of the customer and to protect interest of the customer. In terms, but just to sum it up, and I'll probably just conclude. Maybe I'm crossing the time that I've been allocated. To sum it up, I think, but everything is not really bad and ugly, which is coming out of this situation, because eventually what will happen because of this, I'm expecting that there will be a huge amount of M&A activity which will happen in the sector. There would be consolidation. There will be fewer airlines globally. More stronger airlines and more serious players are the ones which will probably survive this crisis and will emerge as extremely strong airlines. Also, a huge another thing that I am seeing in Indian Airlines especially and globally as well is rationalization of some kind of cost. So, for example, pilots and crew are like a huge chunk of cost for the airlines, and in India, not globally, but in India, pilots and crew have protected hours, which could range anywhere between 50 to 70, and in some cases 100 protected hours, which basically means whether the pilot flies the aircraft or not, they will get that much money as pay. Now, that is something which is rapidly changing. So that's a cost saving. With this would definitely this is leading to opening up of slots and routes for newer airlines like ours who want to sort of expand, because what this actually has done, it's actually just put a reset button. So all the airlines who had made gains in the last 10 years, they have been put on some kind of a reset, and they have to sort of rethink their strategy and regain the market. So, the market share is really up for grabs for anyone and everyone. And for a new airline like us, I think that's certainly a positive development. Also, for an India airline like us, the model which was traditionally being followed globally for airlines was the hub and spoke model. So typically you can think of your Middle Eastern carriers, think of Etihad or of Emirates or Qatar. So they were basically flying passengers, for example, from Delhi or other parts of India, and then would take them to their hub in Doha or in Abu Dhabi or in Dubai, whichever airline it may be, and then take them to their final destination. So now passengers, because of this corona situation, the trend that we have at least come across is that passengers are wanting to travel directly and point to point. So that's good news for Indian carriers in general, because then Indian carriers will have the ability to capture their client base and provide seamless direct connectivity to Indian passengers to their final destination. So those are my thoughts.
Excellent, Shashank. I think that's a very good overview of not only the financial aspects, but also you picked up on operational issues, but also on the overall economics of how airlines are going to reset themselves. I think on the financial side, let me just quickly say, or the battle that the airlines are going through is the level playing field. Because if I understood correctly, if government is going to take a side or just prefer few airlines or just the national carrier, then of course you have a much bigger issue. But, as a private carrier or as a carrier who you expect to be part of the overall scheme of things or in scheme of things. So I'll stop there, but I think to me the level playing field is probably equally important as much as the financial aspects. And I think we'll move on. So we'll put the third question for the poll, and then ask Mr. Bawa to share his views, especially he's coming from an airport standpoint, or especially from an airport standpoint. So Tariq.
All right. Yes, it will be in 30 seconds.
But for the listeners, in the meantime, just to also stress you should see the scope of things that Shashank has shared with us, which covers from a corporate law to direct indirect taxation to to M&A, which is also again part of corporate law. But aviation should be looked in sync with other disciplines of law. You cannot just look at aviation as aviation.
They have
the tip there. We have a third question. Yeah. So what factors?
Yeah, we have a third question. They have undertaken.
Okay. So the third question for the audience is, what factors will help to revive the aviation sector and/or will help to regain the trust of travelers? We are talking about future now. So what is it that as a customer, what would you value the most, or what would you think airlines should be doing more, or how airlines could add value to the economy as such in general by taking some of these things forward, like innovation, or using more digital technologies, or probably more greener aircraft, because you're willing to travel thinking that you're going to have less CO2 emissions in the mode of transport that you're using.
Sagar sir, we have still 20 seconds to close the poll.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there anything that Shashank or Ujjwal, would you like to pitch in here on this particular question, or maybe Nitin on?
Yes, I think there were a couple of points on this which I had, not a very strong opinion, but at least from a legal perspective, I think what's going to give regain the trust of the flying community, apart from what you said, greener technology and things, is to have a strong set of laws which are properly implemented for violation of any future COVID laws that we're going to have. So as we traditionally have a strict set of laws in India, we've seen over the years that the implementation is not all that strict. We have that chalta hai sort of attitude. So as long as these rules and things are not properly enforced, the trust of the community will not be regained. Quickly to the second point, I think even Ujjwal's slide on biosecurity made a lot of sense. That is going to be the future. As someone pointed out recently, it's most definitely going to be the third station you go to after you land into a country. You'll have security, customs, and without a doubt you're going to have some sort of medical screening next. What can the government do? This is not very legal, but also we need a widespread sort of campaign which will be jointly by the ministry, the DGCA, the airlines, the airports, just to both online and offline, to encourage people to say that come, it's not you're not going to get some deadly disease by flying on an aircraft. So please come and travel.
Thank you, Nitin. So, Shashank, do you have anything? Or
yes, I actually think on your poll that I think innovation and digital technology is something which will be extremely important and will really help revive the aviation sector. And I'll tell you why I think so, and I feel very strongly about it, because I think if you don't innovate, then in that situation, you will get redundant. And by innovation, I mean innovation is something which will help airlines sort of generate additional revenue. So the aspect that I spoke of, RAS, which is revenue per kilometer, in today's time and age, is largely supported globally by ancillary revenue. So the chunk that the bottom line of the airlines, approximately 30% is what is supported by ancillaries globally, and that is where this innovation and digital technology comes in place to help the bottom line in terms of revenue. In terms of cost, everyone knows that more and efficient engines, for example, the Neo engine or the Trent 1000 engine or the GenX engine, which are available on the 787s and 320s respectively, are actually one of the most environmentally friendly and advanced engines in terms of fuel they burn. So those are the kind of measures which would be required to save costs, because it's going to be super hard, especially in a market like India, to push up the cost of the tickets, because it's a very, very price conscious market. So airlines will need to get innovative and will need to adapt technology to sort of to improve their bottom lines and at the same time save on the top line. And that's where technology and innovation will come into place. It's very simple. If you look around, if you look at it, there have been certain types of aircraft which have been victims of corona crisis. So, and I can just very quickly name those two. One is the A380 aircraft, which has become practically obsolete because of the corona crisis, because there simply will be never sufficient demand to fill that plane. It was very difficult previously, and now it's going to be extremely difficult. And the other one is the Boeing 747, and that's because it's very fuel inefficient and is old technology. So those two aircraft have taken the toll. As a aviation geek myself, I'm very sad with the demise of those two wonderful aircraft. But I think it was required from the perspective of innovation and technology, because that technology is simply not relevant in today's time. So I think airlines will have to be innovative and will have to sort of invest. So aircraft like the Boeing 787 or the Airbus 321 aircraft, along with innovative products like Blue Box, where people can see television or data on their cell phones, internet access, phone access on aircraft, and those kind of facilities and things will be extremely relevant. And also passengers are getting very, very conscious of their carbon footprint. So, so that's again, something which is a motivating factor. It's eventually all about the customer and customer experience, at the same time at saving costs and adding to the revenue of the airline. So I think this is absolutely crucial and critical for any airline to survive and to go forward. If you think of Pan Am, for example, historically looking, it flourished because it was the first one to embrace the 747 aircraft. But it perished pretty quickly when the Gulf War had happened, because there was no demand for its routes and it was not able to fill 747. So you can just, that is an example you can go on. Sorry.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Susan, for the intervention. Yeah. Okay. Like 1 minute, Ujjwal. Before,
yeah, sure. I completely agree. Very quickly, I completely agree with Shashank. I think aviation remains among the few sectors where efficiency and sustainability are directly correlated, and the more efficient we are, the more environmentally conscious we are. Point completely resonated. And also, I would like to say that the most important thing here to revive would be, among the 4 options that have been given, would be innovation and digital technology. For example, the home printed back tag, which has been a global norm everywhere, was struggling because of some policy gap or something, some stakeholders not being entirely confident about it. But just when COVID happened and they realized that now, okay, we need to start after we stopped, the home printed back tag became a norm. Web check-ins became a mandatory practice. So, for us to be able to successfully restart and expedite or leapfrog towards normalization, I think innovation and technology will play the most critical role. That's it.
Okay, good. Thank you. At least it confirms my reading of the situation or the future probably isn't like, we'll all be out of business. So Mr. Baba, off to you or on to you to share your views. So we are running a bit late on our timing, but no pressure. Just go ahead and share your views, please.
I will first upon the response of the
Mr. Baba, we cannot hear you. Sorry. Mr. Baba, we cannot hear you.
Why?
We cannot.
Am I audible?
Yeah, it's better now. Yes.
Why? It's better?
It's.
Is that okay now?
It's clear. It's clear.
Right. So, yes, innovation and technology development has been appreciated by all. The pool also supported that. And if we slightly unwind the timeline, and before Corona, before COVID-19 impacted, what was happening? I happens to be in Singapore. It was first week of February. I think I landed on 7th, back on 7th of February. There was a lot of crisis at that time, both in Singapore and both at our own airport when I came back. And at that time, only thing was that how to digitize our operations. And few days back, only at that time, the Terminal 4 was launched.
Mr. Baba,
Artificial intelligence, facial recognition. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Right. So, be it artificial intelligence, be it robotics, or be it any form of technology, we are talking about technology, technology, and technology only. In between, COVID and Corona came, and we forgot everything. We started fighting for survival now. The moment this water calms down, we will go back to that. And only thing is, this pandemic has emphasized the need of technology. Rather, before that, we were skeptical about automation. People were talking that it is employment killer. It is against the it will replace the human beings. Nothing of that sort will happen now, I personally feel. And another angle to that is why it will be sustainable and survival. Because what we do only two types of things. One, our mental faculty, and second, our physical activity. Now, both the factors have been taken over by the machine. Physical activity was already robots were doing. Artificial intelligence and facial recognition has filled that gap of complete human being doing our job. And as regards facilities at the airport, Government of India itself has launched before COVID itself the Digi Yatra. So Digi Yatra is nothing but the digital technology being at the airport. And also now coming with the COVID-19, 10th of July, ICAO itself has announced the IPEX. So like that, everybody is in sync with that. Innovation and technology will survive, right? Now, coming back to my brief outline on the subject, it has already been spoken that the trigger point was when ICAO said in April end that the pandemic is going to be with fewer international travelers. They assessed it by 1.2 million. Subsequently, they assessed it to 1.5 billion. With this, alarm bells started ringing, and also addressed that the 73 billion losses in the airline industry. So once that was being talked, the good thing is ICAO established a full-fledged aviation recovery task force. This happened earlier, the better. And then also, as per their mandate, they are only advisory. So they advised everybody that each country should establish their aviation recovery task force. So now once ICAO starts saying it is the duty of all stakeholders to be part of that task force in whatever way they can. If they cannot do physically, at least they should share their mandate date with the members of ICAO Aviation Recovery Task Force. If they cannot do it in their own country, they can do with the masters directly because they are always open. Now, this pandemic, particularly this COVID-19, is the rarest of rare. Pandemic had been happening. We had been seeing the aviation was not there at that time so strong as aviation is today. So that's the reason we have felt the hurt most. And I personally say that aviation has, this pandemic has put the aviation into tailspin. And we were virtually grounded. And now we are relearning to fly. And the seesaw of rise and fall or decline of COVID-19 affected citizens is varying day-to-day basis. Today we find some countries improving, again we say, oh no, again they are started increasing. So we cannot say that stability is there. Stability is unseen. It will be unseen for some time. So we should not look for short-term solution. We should look for long-term solution. And financial, everybody has talked, billions of dollars are at stake. I agree. And only thing that is worrying me is that if we want to know where the punch has been the most, I was able to look the data between February to April end, and I was looking that the negative impact was the most, rather to the tune of 85 to 93% in respect of Sweden, UAE, France, Italy, Singapore, UK, Hong Kong, Spain, and Germany. Why I am naming this country is that if we have to look for some solutions, we should always look upon these countries because they have suffered the most. They know what way they are able to come out of that. India, of course, India and Australia also registered decline. We were to the tune of 70 to 78%, and this was too much for us. It is not saying that we were having a less impacted, but then there are people who were having more severely impacted. The global scheduled airline capacity had declined from 100 million to merely 50 million. That was alarming figure. We were virtually become activity less. Around 17th March, Canada also introduced sweeping travel restriction. When all developed countries started putting restriction, everybody started getting alarmed, and the alarm bell rang at the door of India also. So we know that how we have started the lock period. We started with 1 day lockdown. We entered into 21 lockdown. Then lockdown 1, 2, 3, 4. Now with the grace of God, we have started. We have taken a U-turn. We have come to unlock 1. I do not know. Unlock 1 should not become lock 5 because again we are hearing every type of news that it is still increasing, but I am sure all efforts will result in controlling that. The impact on civil aviation in the terms of employment, in terms of jobs, or in terms of travelers, it has been talked in detail by the other speakers. I need not to develop on the figures because data, ladies watches and data never agree. So there will be some minor difference between my data and the data given. So, but whatever the data has been given, it is in the ballpark figure. Now, what is at stake? What is the fear? The fear is fear of safety of passengers. Fear is the fear of health of passengers. Fear is maintaining the hygiene at the airport. Fear is maintaining the hygiene in the cabin. Fear is maintaining the hygiene at the destination. All these fears together is the result of pools which we had just seen. If we can eradicate these fears, then no one can stop revival of growth of aviation. And operational hurdles include contactless handling at airports with physical distance, and the new normal is going to be for long term. So that's the reason we should work for new normal, and we should win over the passengers. On financial terms, yes, we all are aware 600 plus aircraft have been grounded, which is not a small figure, which is a very big figure. And they have been grounded without any compensation, without any work. Their maintenance There are fixed costs. People have talked about that. There are rentals available. There are lease values of that. And then wear and tear also gets increased when they are grounded. Aircrafts meant to be on the sky. Aircrafts are never meant to be on the ground. If we are on the ground, they suffer a lot. But the biggest hurdle in operation is the health and safety of the crew. In the first instance, then the ground stop of the passengers. So recently on 6th July, Singapore and United Kingdom have commenced a series of trials to test the crew module of ICAO. And under this, they ensure what are the impact, what are the vulnerable area, how they can remove all the vulnerable area when the flight is taking place. And these guidelines broadly aim to reduce the public health risk to air passengers, air crew, air staff, while strengthening the confidence among the traveling public also built. The moment we have been talking, at present, even the airline staff themselves are not confident to fly. Once they become confident, their families become confident, of course the passenger will become confident. So that is we have to win. First, we have to win our in-house. Then financial, I have already talked, but one point I want to add, which at that time I didn't want to interrupt the speaker. Recently, government announced some relief package. I know indeed in that relief package, there was no mention of the civil aviation, but there was a big mention of MROs and rationalization of airspace. We know that how airlines have always been cribbing about the fuel cost. And if we are able to rationalize the airspace, we will have the less consumption of fuel. And the government has made a notice of that. And of course, it will take some time. But once it's taken, it will be a relief to the industry. And then, of course, I do not want to come on the assessment of the amount or the value of compensation. But yes, compensation is needed. If it cannot be given in cash, it should be given in kind. And the government is ready, and government is giving in kind wherever it is possible. And
Mr. Bawa, can you conclude?
Right. In the concluding, I must stop with a positive statement. First, India had been leading the growth pattern so far as the civil aviation in the country is concerned. All along, we did double-digit growth. In particular, destinations were registered growth. There are particular destinations which registered a growth of 25 to 30%. Overall, India registered a growth of 11%, when the world was only at the average of 5 to 6%. That means our genes are strong enough to sustain the growth pattern. And as and when we win over the COVID, we will again be the best horse. We will be running the fastest. And recently, out-of-the-box solutions were found. One being Desh Videsh to Aas-Paas. You see, we were spending a lot of money going foreign countries. Now it has been coined, instead of Desh Videsh, you go to Aas-Paas. Because if we have improved our country, if we are clear, purpose is to fly, purpose is to generate business, we can adopt Aas-Paas. You given a notice of time, I will skip certain points, but I must say the need for highest level political involvement is essential to assure meaningful commitments and follow-ups on the path of jump-starting the aviation engine or their economy is taken up. And you cannot do that until unless all stakeholders come under one umbrella. If you cannot put whole of the civil aviation on one page, you cannot win over. ITA talks that they are meant for airlines only. ICAO think that they are the government. ACI think they are the airports. Where the passenger will go? Everybody will have to think that if passenger is there, they are there. They will have to come under one umbrella, and that one umbrella only will make them survive. That's what my take on this. Thank you.
Mr. Bawa, that's very well spoken. The conclusion probably will be the highlight of this session as well. That collaboration and cooperation between all the parties here should remain the goal, and probably that's the only way forward as well in terms of seeing some progress. Having said that, I think we have the last speaker, so let's go ahead because of the time constraint we already have. So Nitin, maybe you need to pull all these things together and give the real legal insight into what this whole, what are the real legal hurdles that the industry is facing. I think Shashank has already outlined, but maybe you can build on that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I have prepared a 7 to 8 minute sort of talk, but I'm going to limit it to 2 to 3 minutes because a lot has been discussed, a lot has been talked about, so I'll only talk about the relevant points. So just to give you a brief introduction to everyone, we're a law firm specializing in aviation law. Interestingly, from Ujjal's slides, I learned that we were established 13 years before IATA in the year 1932. So we've been around for a long time, not in aviation, but we have for the last decade been in aviation. I wanted to start by saying or giving you an idea of how COVID has affected me personally. So number one, I'm a very avid traveler. I'm an aviation enthusiast. 2020 had a series of travel for me for work as well as pleasure, which of course has all gone down the drain. It's hard to think that from the 17th of January this year, when the government came out with its first sort of notification saying all passengers from China have to be thermal screened, to where we are today. It's a huge shift, and no one could have imagined that we'd be here today. My biggest regret, my daughter is a 1.5 years old, and we're going to have to buy her a seat the next time we travel. So my wife and I had plans to travel the world by not having to buy her, a third seat, which you have to do after a child is 2 years old. Coming quickly to the state of aviation in India, pre-COVID, so a lot of our airlines not doing all that well. So like it or not, we had reached a fairly dangerous spot, both economically, capacity-wise, taxation-wise, infrastructure cost-wise. So we weren't doing extremely well. COVID, in essence, has brought the industry down to its knees, which is an extremely scary fact. And the biggest problem, as has been highlighted earlier, and one of my colleagues and the whole team has been harping on, is the lack of capacity or the demand for capacity, just because people are scared to travel. So the government may open up 100% capacity, but there's still, in my opinion, there will still be a very small amount of the traveling public who will want to travel. That being said, the purpose of my presentation today is to really talk about the legal and regulatory challenges which have come up in the industry thanks to COVID-19. A lot of you may or may not have heard about the whole idea of putting a passenger's money into a credit shell. So imagine a situation, I'm sure the 502 participants we have online at the moment, at least a couple of you would have faced this, where you've booked a ticket, it's been cancelled for because of a government order saying that flights be grounded, and you go and try to get a refund from the airlines, and the airlines just turn around and say, "Oh, sorry, we'll keep that money for you aside. We'll do, honor it if you ever want to travel with us, but we're not giving you a full refund." So that brought up a lot of issues with the flying public. The government had to step in and say, airlines, please refund all the money for tickets that were bought during the period of the lockdown. So the rationale behind that was, as the government kept extending the travel ban, passengers kept thinking that, okay, we can fly after the 15th of May, and then the 15th of May came and the travel ban was extended further. So there was a little bit of protection given there to a certain number of passengers. But overall, there are a lot of unhappy passengers. There's a lot of money with airlines, which could rightly have been in a passenger's bank earning interest. So that's one aspect of legality which has come to light. Very importantly about this credit shell, so the civil aviation requirement, which is basically the law on the subject, says that yes, airlines, you most definitely can keep money in credit shells. However, it's subject to two things. Number one, it has to be only in an exceptional circumstance. And number two, it has to be with the concurrence of the passenger. So there's a little bit of a gray area whether the airlines are following that CAR to the T or not. We'll really find out once courts start functioning again. Consumer courts. I am well aware of the fact that this matter is pending before the Supreme Court, and it's going to come up for hearing in the third week of July. So it's really, we'll have to see where things pan out. But that is one of the main legal hurdles which the flying public from a passenger rights perspective has been facing. Touching very lightly on tax issues, Shashank and other co-panelists have mentioned that, particularly from an aircraft leasing standpoint, there's been a lot of research put into this. If we were to lease, if an Indian airline was to lease or finance an aircraft from an Indian entity, instead of doing this, whole elaborate structure of leasing from Ireland, etc., the overall cost works out to almost 50% more than without this elaborate structure. So that's something which has to be worked on. ATF, tax on ATF, GST on ATF has been talked about. My opinion on why India did not give its a fairly decent financial package to the airlines is because aviation is still looked at as a luxury. So it's still seen as a very luxurious sort of industry, and I'm also fairly certain that the government would have been a bit hesitant to pump in money into one particular industry when there are so many others who are also required, who require support. Kind of goes back to that whole aspect of when you become a politician, you may have the swankiest of ties, but you will always be in a white kurta pajama. So we have to understand where the mean citizen in India comes from. And unfortunately, taking them into perspective, aviation is still extremely luxurious. The second point which I've noted down is a legal hurdle which the government will face. And I do note that there are some extremely competent officers from the government who are listening in. I can see them on the list. But it's very important for the government to stay up to date, to stay dynamic with the changing situation. I am very well aware that it's not easy. Our Ministry of Civil Aviation is, I'm not trying to butter someone up, but they're very good. They respond to emails. The DGCA responds to emails. They've been extremely efficient. I honestly think the reason for this is because they deal with such multinational people from different countries and things. So we really have a good setup. But the Ministry of Civil Aviation, for a lot of its decisions, has to be talking to the Ministry of External Affairs, Home Affairs, and Economic Affairs as far as COVID-19 decisions are taken. So that's another issue. The other legal issue which comes to light is with these Vande Bharat flights. So as you know, Air India has done a spectacular job. Don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing them. But in the larger scheme of international air law or aviation law, they did one thing extremely interesting. So not only was Air India flying, say, for example, to the US to bring back stranded Indian citizens, they were also very interestingly selling the seats from India to the US for fare-paying passengers. And the shell of people who could buy those flights was very vast. It was literally OCI card holders, people who had long-term visas. So these days almost everyone has a long-term visa to the US because they give only 10-year visas in most circumstances. So that sort of ruffled a lot of feathers, which ultimately led to the US government sort of not blacklisting Air India, but saying, hey guys, watch out, either give us parity, because again, this is a whole lecture I can give people, but the basis of air law is essentially just reciprocity. So you scratch my back, I scratch yours. That's the more negative connotation, but it's more like you give me X and I'll give you X. So that's another legal hurdle which has come in. Things are sort of easing out with certain American airlines being given rights to fly into India. The aircraft leasing aspect is also extremely interesting. We are faced with a very interesting situation where leasing companies have airlines who are in extreme default. So most of our airlines, I'm not saying all, most of our airlines are in extreme default at the moment, but we are faced with a very unique situation where leasing companies themselves don't want to take the aircraft back, because what are you going to do with an aircraft when you can't place it? So a wise lawyer would always suggest to a client that, it's better to have an actionable claim. At least you have some hope of getting it back through some judicial process in the future, rather than just terminating and taking a plane back. But again, it's a mixed bag of what's going to happen. Extremely unique to this COVID-19 situation. A few other legal issues which could be issues in the future are, capping of fares. Till the 24th of August this year, the government has, strong caps on fares what airlines can charge. Another legal issue could be the capacity. So airlines at the moment are only allowed to utilize 45% of their capacity, which is a good thing for the short run, but in the long run, we know how dangerous it is to cap fares, and a free market is always the best judge. Touching on the insolvency and bankruptcy code ordinance, everyone's, at least from the legal fraternity, is fairly well versed with what they've done. So debt accruing from this COVID-19 period has sort of been excluded from the process, which from an aviation perspective definitely helps airlines. But at the same time, from an aircraft finance and leasing perspective, it doesn't bother the industry too much, because the IBC was anyways in conflict with the Cape Town Convention and other very important aspects. So the government saying that, okay, the IBC will not get kicked in, just helps someone who wants to repossess an aircraft and avoids the whole moratorium coming in place. That was on a very last and very controversial sort of subject, which is fairly legal, and it's fairly important to all of us, since all of us in some way are responsible for this, is the Air India disinvestment. So I think that's going to be a very interesting thing to watch as to what happens. People are saying, oh, why would the government put more money into private players when the taxpayers anyways funding this massive behemoth of an airline? And it's a good point. It's a good point. Air India, from being one of an insecure sort of employer a few months ago, I have friends from Emirates and Etihad, messaging me saying, oh man, I really wish we were still with Air India, because at the moment that's the safest place for an employee to be. So it's just interesting how that pans out. Financial support by the government or no financial support by the government has already been pointed out. Predictions for what lie ahead, I don't see any change happening, at least in 2020. If at all we'll see any movement, it will be in 2021. This is for a number of reasons, mainly consumer confidence, and of course, things like vaccines and things, again, which most of the Indian public is possibly not going to be able to afford, or it's going to take a couple of decades for the Indian government to sort of ensure everyone's immunized. We all know what Rotary has done with polio and how long it took them to do that. Different scales, but more or less the same thing. On a positive front, 3 to 5 years to come back to pre-COVID times, and this is a real make or break sort of movement from a legal and regulatory perspective from the government. Steps which are taken now will have a far-reaching effect for an industry which is destined to boom. With our population and with our honesty. We haven't gone around saying, oh, we've got less than 100,000 cases like certain other billion population countries have. So it has democracy has been our biggest strength, and it has been our biggest downfall. So with that, thank you, Sagar.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you very much. I think you touched upon a number of legal issues. Unfortunately, we did run out of time as well, with all the speakers taking a good enough time. But at the same time, I think we answered quite a number of questions that came through in our Q&A session. I think as a reflection, what we should probably do is, to the listeners, of course, we will respond to you in writing on most of these questions. So we will do that. But I think there are elements. Maybe what I would say is if each of you can take 30 seconds, like if there's one ask to the government, or what is it that you would like to see, maybe, and then we close the call, we close the webinar session. So I'll start with Shashank from the airline. Is there one ask, Shashank, that you have? And we have like 2 minutes to close the call now, so very quick, very crisp.
Put ATF under GST. I think that would solve many things for airlines.
Okay, Ujjwal, what is it that one ask you have for the government? Okay.
Sorry about that. I wish I could put my finger onto just one, but I can just say that it has to be a very concerted effort on 3 fronts. One is harmonized regulations and frameworks. Second is aid and a more, informed view towards airlines or the aviation sector. And the third is communication. For us as industry stakeholders, it is more important than ever to communicate with the consumer to bring up the confidence. Thank you.
Mr. Baba?
My wish is that this selfishness, everybody
We don't hear you.
Each other together.
Mr. Baba, we don't hear you, but Nitin, you go ahead, please. Mr. Baba, hold on.
Okay.
Yes, a very short paragraph from me. I would urge for the industry players, the government, everyone to sit down, look at where we are placed geographically in the world, and think, why can't we be at Dubai? Why can't we be at Singapore? There's nothing which is lacking in us. Air India used to be the world's best airline at one point. Let's go back and show the world how we can regain that glory. It's not so hard.
Well said.
Am I audible?
Yes, Baba Sahab, go ahead. Last question, we can conclude.
Okay. So my wish is that everybody should come on one page, and we should not work for individual gains. We should work for the common gain. Together, we will be successful. That's what my wish is. That.
Okay. Sagar? Okay. Sagar?
I think he may have got knocked off. Let's just give it a
some connectivity issue with Sagar, sir.
Okay. Lakshmi, now I think Sagar is the last words. I want to thank everyone, particularly, moderator, Mr. Sagar. He has done an excellent job. I thank all the speakers, particularly my team, Lakshmi, Tariq, and everybody on behalf of Nalsar Center for Aerospace and Defense Laws. One announcement. We are going to have another webinar on 19th at 3:30. That's next Sunday, on unlocking India's private space sector, legal and policy challenges. I think Lakshmi and my team will come up by today evening. We are going to open for the next Sunday session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So, dear participants, we are going to give all the answers. We got a lot of questions. We are going to send you all, in written form. Thank you for participating and making this as a grand success. Thank you.